up, but I'm going to ask that person to hold that thought unless it's vital until we get started here, because we have to officially call the meeting and run through some boilerplate required announcements before we can get started. So, all right, so I'm going to officially call the May 5th, 2021 meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission to order. I guess before we can get started officially, I need to announce, because this meeting is being held virtually, that the meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of the Planning Commission will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and all members of the public are welcome to view the meeting at www.fallschurchva.gov/PC and on Falls Church City Television, which you can watch on Cox Channel 11, RCN Channel 2, or Verizon Fios Channel 35. Public comments are accepted virtually. Those who have signed up to speak via the meeting video through the meeting video platform. To speak on a public hearing item or provide general public comment, you should have completed a speaker form at www.fallschurchva.gov/public comment before noon today. Following the submission of that form, you should have received. I don't know why I'm reading this kind of now that that time has passed, but you should have received email instructions on how to join the virtual Planning Commission meeting. You can also provide written comments in advance of the meeting, which are accepted at the email address plan@fallschurchva.gov. Those are also accepted until noon on the day of the meeting. And those comments that are received by noon are sent to the Planning Commission and are summarized here at the meeting. So with that, I'll ask, I guess, is it Mr. Fuller or Mr. Holler who's going to call the roll tonight?
Mr. Hollern will.
Okay.
Ms. Comont?
Here.
Ms. Weiss?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Puentes?
Here.
Mr. Krasner?
I am here. All right. So we'll move along here, and then the next item, of course, is adoption of the agenda. Discuss this agenda with Mr. Stoddard. I had no issues with the order as presented, so unless anybody else does, I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda tonight as printed.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by, I'm sorry, I can't see.
Seconded by Ms. Weiss.
Okay, good. And that'll help out Mr. Holler, who has to take notes. Okay, any discussion? If not, Mr. Holler, can you call the roll?
Mr. Puentes?
Yes.
Ms. Comont?
Yes.
Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes. All right, great. So we've adopted the agenda and we will proceed. Hopefully tonight's meeting, we have a few things tonight, but hopefully it won't be quite as lengthy as the last two were. So first thing, of course, is any receipt of petitions for items not on the agenda. Mr. Holler, anything that fits that category?
No.
Okay, good. So we will move right ahead to action items. And our first item for action items is our public hearing on the 128 South Spring Street special use permit. And this is in front of us for a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I believe what we'll do is we'll start with a staff report.
All right. Hello, guys. Cameron Garris here. I'll start us off. Get up myself. As you said, this agenda item is in regard to 128 South Spring Street, special use permit to allow a daycare facility on a residential R1A zone property. The proposed motion is I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the Board of Zoning Appeals of U1623-21 to allowance of 128 South Spring Street to operate as a daycare facility within R1A low density residential zoning as a conditional use of a special use permit subject to the following conditions. 1, that operating hours will be limited between 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. daily. 2, a maximum of 4 teachers and or staff will be permitted at any given time. 3, a maximum of 39 students will be permitted at any given time. 4, on-street parking. Staff will not park directly in front of residential homes nearby the daycare facility. Instead, be limited to areas adjacent to the park on public streets. 5, on-site parking will be limited to parents and visitors only, and staff will rely on on-street parking unless they have to use ADA parking space on-site. 6, on-site parking and pickup drop-off areas will be clearly delineated and signed to ensure pedestrian safety during pickup and drop-off. As was mentioned, this is a request for Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which will occur on May 13th for action item. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the proposed motion. The only additional information staff has received from the applicant since April 21st meeting work session is attached in the email statement, attachment number 4, as well as another attachment which was uploaded more recently, which is parking plan version May 3rd, which provides further explanation regarding parking and pickup and drop-off procedures. At the April 21st work session, Planning Commission raised several issues regarding daycare size, parking, traffic impacts, and some operational details along with how the pickup and drop-off would work. Those comments are summarized in the background section of the report, and in response to feedback, staff has provided the conditions listed above for the applicant, included in the motion for the Planning Commission's consideration of approval. Jeff, if you could open up the parking plan version May 3rd, I will provide a brief, thank you. I'll provide, can you go to page 4, please? I believe it is. As a drawing. Or actually, it was a different attachment. It was more recently uploaded by Emily today, I think.
Hang on, Cameron, let me,
Sure.
is it
Emily had put in there today.
was it in the folder?
It should be in the folder, yeah.
I have an email. I just have the 4 attachments in the folder.
Okay. Well, I'll give a brief explanation. The attachment email will work fine. I'll talk from that, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Wells to give some further explanation if needed. Right now, the parking plan, drop off and pick up. The parents will be instructed to use the lot, which is about 3,600 square feet, in kind of a counterclockwise kiss and ride fashion, which will allow for about 13 cars at a time. Staff will be out to greet children and parents and to monitor child safety and compliance with parking policy. Drop-off and pickup times may also be staggered in small increments via text communication to allow that there's not too much buildup or any backlog on the street. And this parking policy will be communicated with staff and parents beforehand to ensure compliance. And applicant goes in further detail, but Ms. Wells, if you're on the call, would you like to add further explanation?
Mr. Garris, maybe before we do that and go to the applicant, maybe we should just wait and see if, maybe, I mean, I have some questions for staff. And I don't know if other commissioners do too, maybe before we hear, maybe ultimately some of the answers need to come from the applicant, but, I mean, I may let other commissioners go first, but I have a number of questions related to that plan. And I think the public and the commission has that attachment you're talking about. It's uploaded as item 6A, number 5. It's like, it has like a written out, plan, and then some Google Street images, and then like a hand-drawn graphic. Is that
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I will just tell you that I don't know if the geometry would actually work the way it has been drawn on that image 3 sketch. I don't think there's enough room for vehicles to actually make that movement the way it's drawn like that. I also don't think that the curb cut is quite wide enough to allow like 2 cars to come and go at the same time, the way that's been drawn. I don't know. Has anyone actually looked at that? I know it's bad. I know that was hand drawn, I presume, by the applicant, but there we go. I'm just not clear that that's actually wide enough to make the turning radius, especially for larger vehicles, which most parents drive these days. They're not driving sedans. They're driving large medium and large size SUVs and minivans. So I have serious concerns about the feasibility of that. And it also doesn't address the situation as far as ages of children. These children are in car seats, not typically a kiss and ride type of scenario, unless I don't know how old the youngest children would be, but, below about age 4, you probably are going to have kids who are not able to unbuckle themselves from a car seat or a booster seat. So people will need to park. So anyhow, I mean, that drawing just raises a whole host of issues for me, but maybe before I go through any other my comments, I'll open it up to if staff is done with their presentation, I would open it up to other commissioners if they have any other questions or comments for staff. Tim, Mr. Stevens just raised his hand.
Yes, I just had one question, Mr. Garris. I see that the staff has proposed reducing the limit on the number of children to, I believe it's 39, and that's down from the current, or what used to be, or the request used to be at 49. So it's come down. Question I have is, was there a limit on the previous operation of the child care at this facility?
I'm not sure that there was a hard limit in place in terms of a policy, but I believe the previous daycare facility had, I think, a cap of 25. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Wells, but 25.
So this would look to be a bigger operation now.
Yes. And in regards for, I'll just give some brief follow-up with the question with the kiss and ride. You are correct that the intention is that many of these children will not be able to obviously get out of the car themselves unless they're elementary school age, so that these cars would be parked. The parents themselves would be helping children's strollers up the ramp, as well as rotation of the 4 staff members to come out, help as well, and to get the children inside and cars move along as quickly as possible, and to kind of follow this rotation. The average turn radius of like a passenger vehicle was about 35 feet. We have 45 feet here. I'm not certain. I can't speak for larger vans or trucks or see if that would accommodate that. Maybe tight. But if you're kind of keeping along the perimeter, you could accommodate most smaller vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just interject. I mean, it also, it presumes that the lot is obviously empty, and then it presumes other folks have to park, like staff, and need to park then somewhere else, and this lot needs to be cleared at that time. And I don't know, did the previous daycare operate this way? I mean, it just seems like that would be difficult on this lot. I mean, I don't know, I don't know. It just seems that like it might not work because, if it, based on the number of, I don't know, depending on the number of people that were arriving at one time. I know they talk about staggering, but it just doesn't seem very realistic. And also the curb cut just seems narrow. I don't know how well you could have two cars passing each other in order to make these movements. So again, because also partially the problem is the lot itself obviously is not well defined. It's gravel. There are a few curb blocks, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, it just seems that this may not work. I'm just not so sure that this has been drawn really accurately. I mean, it was a good attempt to try to simulate what could happen, I suppose, but anyhow, I just have some doubts about it and some concerns that this could actually be implemented the way it's shown. Ms. Weiss had her hand up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is just a question, and I wish I'd asked this last time, but just so I understand special use permits, this site was a daycare previously. So is there already a special use permit in place for this site for a daycare?
I don't believe so. I believe the last facility was not a full daycare facility. I believe it was a child care center, but did not have the full special use permit. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to come back with that answer.
That would be, it would be good to know, because it would be good to know if that exists already. And my understanding is that a special use permit attaches to a site, not to a specific business. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but that would be my understanding. So my question is, what's already in place? I think in terms of, the neighbors being accustomed to daycare, there's certainly that experience, but it'd be good to understand what was permitted and really understanding the difference between the number of kids that were there before and when there was drop off previously. I think there probably would be some appreciation for traffic calming that drop off and pickup would allow for. But if this is going from 25 kids being dropped off in the morning to, 39, that's a material difference, and having a more clear plan, I think, would be necessary. I know from my experience dropping off my kiddos at Communikids, Kiss and Ride can work with the seat, with the car seat age, with teachers grabbing them out of the car, and so that is a possibility, and there might be other ways to do this. But I just wanted to understand really better what was going on in the site previously in terms of permitted uses and number of kids and hours of operation.
Sorry, Ms. Coman had her hand up.
Hi, sorry. I lost my connection briefly, so I don't know if somebody's made this point, but in my experience, dropping my kids off at daycare in Clarendon, which was very busy and very well populated, it was very rare that everybody was sort of arriving at the exact same moment. And so I think that, parents kind of come, throughout a window of maybe 30, depending on exactly what the hours are. It could be, as long as a 2-hour window that people would be dropping off. And my understanding from the applicant is that some of the younger children would actually be accompanied by their parents or caregivers for programming at the school. I might want to hear a little more about that exactly. So there wouldn't really be a drop-off situation in that. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't actually think there will be 13 cars in that lot, sort of in a little semicircle at one point in time. That seems unlikely to me.
Okay, thank you.
And I sorry, I just want to also second Ms. Weiss's comments about understanding whether there is still a special use permit in place, and also the maximum number of students that were served with the previous daycare operation. That would be helpful information to know for comparison. But my understanding from neighbors to the previous daycare is that it operated very well, and there were no concerns on the street.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Coma. And I believe staff maybe can correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Mr. Stoddard, somebody mentioned last time that there had been a daycare that operated up until some point in the past, but the special use permits do expire. They don't run forever. If the use ceases to operate, typically for like anywhere from like usually around 2 years. I'm not sure exactly what the time frame is, but they do typically expire. And I thought Mr. Stoddard had said that either they weren't able to locate a formal approval of the previous one, and or it had expired. Is that right, Mr. Garris? I thought Mr. Stoddard had mentioned that.
That does sound right. I believe that, from my knowledge, that it was 25 kids in the past had been at the daycare, and that it had been at least a decade since it had operated. So that would certainly have a time of expiration there.
Right. Yeah, that's what I recall Mr. Stoddard mentioning that, so that sounds about right. Well, all right, no one else has their hand up. We can definitely, we'll hear from the applicant, and I guess it's also a public hearing, and we can go through any public comment we got. But I suppose, and ultimately the BZA, I guess, needs to make the decision. But if we're going to give the BZA solid recommendations, I guess there's kind of two ways to handle, the issue of parking. Either it's kind of either or, right? It's either going to be a pickup drop off, kiss and ride line, or kiss and go to daycare line, or it's going to be people actually parking and bringing the kids inside. And I guess, because I know the applicant in her statement mentions like several options. She even talks about like staff parking at the Legion, which is kind of far away, but renting spaces there. And so like I'm seeing like lots of different information in her statement, and I appreciate the additional detail over what we had last time. But I guess I'm just not clear what the actual plan is. Is it this? Is it kiss and ride, or is it people parking? Because I know we had talked about also the fact that the use, regardless, has a parking requirement, based on the zoning ordinance, and they have to provide the requisite number of spaces. And that's was based on like the square footage or staff or whatever it was. And so we wanted to also make sure that the use can, meet the requirement. But if it's like if it's this kind of configuration, well, no one's parking in the parking lot if they're using it like this, in the morning and the afternoon. I guess people could park there in the middle of the day, I guess. But so anyhow, I don't know if staff or the applicant's better to answer that, but I'm looking for some clarity on what the actual proposal is.
I believe that in the paper, applicant had mentioned that there's currently 3 employees she has who would live close enough they actually plan to walk to work, and that the applicant herself plans to park on Irving, walk to the Scout House from there. And in the future, if an employee would need to drive to work and public transit was not an option, that they would have to find a spot to park along the parcel that wouldn't be impactful to neighbors.
Okay. But they still, of course, have to meet and that's great. That helps. But they still have to show that they have the agreement of parking. I thought Mr. Stoddard mentioned, I spoke to him, offline from the meeting, and I thought he mentioned that you guys had determined that that the building could meet it based on the number of spaces in the lot. But again, I'm not seeing that expanded upon in the documents we got today. So I just want to confirm that you guys have in fact confirmed that there's the number of spaces that the ordinance would require for the daycare use to operate there. Because that's kind of like a threshold issue. If they don't have that, right, how can John Boyle issue like a use permit, or, you know, if they can't meet the parking?
She does also have a note that the president of the Scout House Association, Tim Lewis, had confirmed that previously 10 cars could fit comfortably, as well as 2 dedicated handicap spaces.
Okay. That would be 12 spots. And I guess the question is that enough? Ms. Teets just had her hand go up. Ms. Teets?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about my experiences with Easter Sales, which used to be on Cherry Street, and then we moved over off of Hillwood, which had a much smaller area to turn around and had twice as many kids. I just want to reiterate, usually not all the parents arrive at the same time. It's pretty staggered, sometimes over 2 hours, because these Easter Sales opened like 7:30, but parents dropped off anywhere between 7:30 and 9:30, counting on, you know, when their day started. So I just don't think it's, I think that in terms of drop off and everything, there's plenty of room there. I've used the Scout House for big events where I've had like 45 Girl Scouts in the back in the grassy area doing stuff, and we didn't have any trouble with drop off. My main issue was the number of kids inside, because the inside isn't that big. And since they've changed that number, I'm okay with, I think this is fine. I think it will work out fine. I don't think it's going to cause any kind of hardship for the neighborhood, really. I think they'll be able to drop off, and like I said, it'll be staggered. It just won't, I don't think it'll be a big issue.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Teets. I appreciate your perspective. And I'm not trying to be, again, saying that it can't work here. It's just, I'm trying to since we don't have a lot of special use permits, I'm just trying to get a sense of what we require of people, and what kind of basic information they need to show that they meet, and the kind of stuff to help inform the BZA. I'm just trying to get a sense of, I see the conditions that staff has proposed, in the motion. And so I'm assuming those conditions are, staff is saying with those limits that they feel that everything is going to work fine. And that may be the case, but I just want to make sure that we're, not overlooking stuff. So now, okay, so with that though, we haven't heard from the applicant yet, and I want to give, and I apologize, I can't find her name in here. Is the applicant on the call here in the meeting?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I want to. Yeah, so go ahead. I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak, whatever you'd like to present.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm Lisa Wills, and I want to thank you for this opportunity and your time to work with me to make this nature-focused children's program available to the Falls Church community. We all know that this area has a consistently high demand for childcare services, and the need for children to have social time with peers had never seemed more important. As we move out of this pandemic, one thing we have learned is the value of outdoor programs like this one with a focus on the natural world. I'm personally committed to this project as a preschool teacher, childcare provider, and childcare business operator. My experience gives me an understanding of child programs and childcare needs, and also the ability to manage community needs and keep good relations for things like neighborhood traffic and parking. With our focus on nature, we will strongly encourage environmental alternatives like walk, bike, carpool, and public transit. However, I know from experience that it depends on family logistics and things like the weather, and it is important to have a plan for clients using their cars. The most recent parking plan I submitted to you on May 3rd has more details. And here are a few key points. I practice with other teachers parking on this gravel area with our bigger cars and our Kiss and Ride proposed program. My goal is to have good neighbor relations and avoid inconvenience to them. to maintain safety and to have an efficient and organized process. We will have a clearly stated policies for staff parking, client parking, and drop-off, pickup, and visitor parking. Third, for example, for client families, part of the enrollment process will be to review the parking transportation policies, including for pickup and drop-off, and agree to them as a condition of enrollment. Fourth, for child pickup and drop-off, the gravel parking area next to the Scout House can accommodate about 13 cars at any one time. If you see the image, that's 3 that I did this little sketch. I practiced that with other teachers, and we were able to do that. So, you know, pickup drop-off will start from the tree on the left side. If you see the images 4 and 5. And the reason for that, the following cars will make a U shape. It will be prohibited to block the sidewalk or to idle or park on Spring Street for pickup drop-off. Also, drivers will be instructed to approach pickup drop-off from the north, from Broad Street, going south on Spring Street, and make a right turn into the site. If you see the images, image 6, that's a little map. Pickup drop-off can be staggered in small increments so that cars do not exceed the capacity at any one time. Staff will be on hand to manage the process and ensure compliance. I'm exploring environmentally responsible options for signage and directional guide marks in the gravel area, and will coordinate this with the property owners. We will continue to inform clients about the parking and drop-off pickup rules and our good neighbor policy, both during enrollment and in regular reminders such as emails, newsletters. I will also regularly reach out to our neighbors to find out if they're experiencing any inconveniences related to our program. On a few other issues, I do understand your suggestion that the approved number could be 39 and that the child care office will make the final decision about the numbers and age of children and make necessary adjustments. I also wanted to tell you that I appreciate your efforts about the hours of operation, and it makes so much sense to plan for that possibility of longer hours. I also wanted to tell you that for parent caregiver conferences or special meetings, these will be scheduled outside of regular pickup drop-off times to allow for parking in the gravel area. Visitors, guests will be informed ahead of time of nearby public parking options, public transit and walk and bike options. And with our good neighbor policy, they will be discouraged from parking in front of nearby residences. You also mentioned that I'm in conversation with the American Legion. By my previous experience, I worked in a preschool, 130 children, and almost entirely kiss and ride, pick up and drop off, with ages of 2 years through kindergarten. And it took us approximately 10 minutes with minimum disruption to the neighborhood or the street traffic flow to do all this procedure. These worked very smoothly due to having additional staff on hand. I really wanted to thank you for all your work that you put into these projects. I'm open to suggestions about this plan. If you can please let me know if I can provide you with anything else.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Wells. That was very helpful. I see someone's hand is up. I apologize. Now I can't see whose hand is up. Let's mute their microphones before the feedback. Thanks. Someone's hand is raised, but again, with this bug we're having with Teams, I can't see whose hand it is. So you'll have to forgive me.
It's It's Melissa's hand. She might take it down there.
Okay. All right, well, I was just going to say, if any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Wills. Any questions for her? All right, no questions for her. So, Mr. Garrish, just because it is a public hearing, did we receive any public comment on this action item?
No, we have not.
Okay, thank you. Just checking. So, all right. So, I mean, again, I appreciate what everything Ms. Wills said, and I also appreciate the experience that other folks who know the site have had in using the site, in this way. I guess, just for me, and if staff could just again run through the conditions again that you're proposing. I mean, to me, I think they do hit on what we're trying to hit on. And I know the BZA will ultimately, I guess they can tweak these if they'd like, but if we could just run through the conditions and make sure everybody, is clear on them, and if there are any concerns or questions about that.
Sure thing. First condition is regarding operating hours to be limited to 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. daily. Second is a maximum of 4 teachers and or staff permitted at any given time. Third, a maximum of 39 students permitted at any given time. 4, regarding on-street parking, staff will not park directly in front of residential homes nearby the daycare facility, instead be limited to areas adjacent to the park on public streets. 5, on-street parking will be limited to parents and visitor only, and staff will rely on on-street parking unless they have to use an ADA parking space on-site. 6, on-site parking and pickup drop-off areas will be clearly delineated and signed to ensure pedestrian safety during pickup and drop-off.
Excuse me, can I just ask one more thing?
So is that Ms. Wills?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I would like to request the ability to hire at least 1 or 2 additional staff in case there is any need to make this process go more quickly without compromising any safety, especially for children. By my experience, we can always ask parent or caregiver, but I would like to avoid doing that because I really don't want to rely on parent or caregiver, help availability as a primary solution. To get them out of the car, to get the children out of the car. So I would like if you can consider that request, please.
Sure. Mr. Garris, where did the number 4 for staff or teachers come from?
I believe it was the given 3 employees that are currently employed, as well as Ms. Wills herself, and that would be the original request for amount of staff.
So that came from the applicant. That number you didn't suggest.
Just one more point, if I can make, because the ratio, I want to be within the ratio, and ratio for toddlers 16 months to 23 months is 1:5, 2 years 1:8, 3 years is 1:10, school age children 1:20. So I would just like to have an extra staff if there is any need for, especially for drop-off and pickup procedure.
All right, so Mr. Garris, right, so that number came from, you were just essentially memorializing what the applicant initially indicated. Now they're saying 6. Would that change staff's recommendation in any way? Are you comfortable with 6 staff?
We'll be comfortable with additional 2 employees, given the fact that what is item 4 for that staff would be parking on adjacent park or public streets.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ms. Coleman, I see you just raised your hand.
I did. I just want to say I think Ms. Wills's request is reasonable, and I'm actually wondering if we need to include a limit on the number of teachers or staff for any reason, if we're already, as Mr. Hollern points out, including sort of some restrictions on where the staff can park. I don't know that it's up to us to say how many staff she should or should not have. There's already a limit on the number of students, so I think it should be up to her. Depending on the ages of the students, the ratios will vary, and so I just wouldn't want to limit her ability to operate effectively by limiting her number of staff to a particular number.
Okay, Ms. Weiss, your hand just went up.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. I mean, she'll need to follow daycare regulations in terms of number of staff, and without knowing the precise mix of age groups at this point in time, you know, in the absence of then I don't know. I mean, I don't want to limit it aside from whatever daycare regulations would require. Otherwise, she'll have to come back.
Right, and I guess as long, I mean, if we're limiting the maximum number of children, I mean, to some extent, there's like then the theoretical maximum of staff that would sort of derive from that. So I would tend to agree. I mean, I know obviously teachers will need to park, but I think by limiting the number of students to 39, I think it kind of puts a natural, you know, a theoretical cap on the number of teachers that could ever be there to something less than 10. Even if they, even in the most sort of extreme ratio with all very young kids. So yeah, so I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I guess we'll wait and see who makes a motion, and we can tweak that. But I personally don't have a problem with that. I mean, the only other question I have, although maybe before I keep on talking, does anyone else have any other sort of comments, questions they want to make on this before we kind of formally figure out this motion? Okay, I guess my only other question then, and maybe it's more for staff, is I just want to make sure, I mean, I understand like, it seems like they're sort of anticipating or trying to have different options for parking, and we're talking about on-site parking limited to parents, but then again, the applicant's showing like a more of a, you know, a drop-off scenario, and not even really parking. Because the reason that's important is because either the spots need to be, like the lot needs to essentially be empty in order for cars to kind of do that circulation pattern, you know, and or it's a different kind of school and people park and bring their kids in and sign them in or whatever they do, and you know, there's just a different way to operate. So I don't know, you know, again, if staff has a sort of opinion on that, what's more sort of realistic. I mean, to some degree, like the parents parking and walking the kids in is probably, I don't know, it seems more realistic, but than having like a true kiss and ride line, like navigate that little lot. But I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has an opinion on that. I mean, the way the conditions are written, Mr. Garris, we're kind of saying that, you know, we're kind of, I don't know, I guess you're mentioning both options, but they certainly couldn't happen at the same time. You couldn't have a couple people who want to park in the lot and then but also run during that time because you need to keep it open for that circulation. So I don't know what we want to do with that. Ms. Coma, I see your hand is up.
I'd just say, I think it's good to know that both options are possible. And I think it might be up to the applicant and the programming that they develop to find the option that works the best, whether that's, you know, parents are coming over a 2-hour period of drop off or pickup, and it's fine to have people kind of park and bring their children in, or if they need some sort of more organized kiss and ride procedure as outlined in the diagram, which I just want to compliment you on the beautiful drawing in that diagram. I really enjoyed the cars and the tree, so well done.
Oh, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you, allow me to hire more staff because that's very important for this program.
Okay. So with that, I guess I'll look for somebody who's feels up to making a motion on this. And and we can tweak the conditions, I guess, as whoever makes that motion can adjust as they see fit. Ms. Comont, is your hand up to do that?
I can do it. Yeah, I'll try. This is my first motion as a planning commission member, so bear with me. I move that the planning commission recommend approval to the Board of Zoning Appeals of U1623-21 for allowance of 128 South Spring Street to operate as a daycare facility within R-1A low-density residential zoning as a conditional use of a special use permit subject to the following conditions. 1, operating hours will be limited to between 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. daily. We'll strike number 2. I'm not going to read it. 3, a maximum of 39 students will be permitted at any time. 4, for on-street parking, staff will not park directly in front of residential homes nearby the daycare facility and instead be limited to areas adjacent to the park on public streets. 5, on-site parking will be limited to parents and visitors only, and staff will rely on on-street parking unless they have to use the ADA parking space on site. 6, on-site parking and pickup drop-off areas will be clearly delineated and signed to ensure pedestrian safety during pickup and drop-off.
Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Stevens, your hand is up. Is that the second?
Yeah, I can second it. I also wanted to just make a comment that kind of the outstanding issue is the one that Commissioner Wise has, which is there already some special use conditional permit on this property? I don't know if we need that before we go ahead and make our recommendation, but there's kind of preponderance of evidence here is the way I look at this, and we may not necessarily have to have all of those details because we know that this has operated as a daycare in the past, so we can take some comfort from that. But I just wanted to raise that as an issue. Otherwise, I'm comfortable with seconding the motion.
This is Ms. Teets. Just so you guys know, technically special permits have to be redone. They don't last forever. Most of them have a 2 or 3 year life span, and then they're supposed to be reapplied for. Now, we don't, a lot of times we let people roll, but yeah, if there was a special permit in the past, it's probably no longer functional.
Yeah, I think Ms. Teets is probably right for what it's worth. I think that, especially if it's been some time since it operated, they also usually expire. They don't run with the land forever. And so, right. And even if there somehow was, I mean, this one would essentially supersede that. This would almost be like an amendment to that and supersede it. So, and ultimately the BZA, I guess, will have to, chew on that issue. But I think that we're good to make the recommendation based on this. I don't think there is a valid one anymore, in my opinion. Ms. Weiss?
I wanted to ask a question about on-site parking being limited to parents and visitors only, in the context of that either there's kiss and ride or there's on-site parking, and I just wonder if number 5 is a decision that the applicant should make, depending on the business model and the programming. And the reason being that if for some reason kiss and ride does work and parents and visitors aren't doing a lot of parking there, might it make sense for staff to park on site? I guess my question is in the context of zoning, and we're talking, like 4, 5, 6 staff, is it a problem to grant the flexibility to figure out where staff park? Do we need number 5 is my question.
Yeah, Ms. Weiss, I would say, that's a good point. I guess the question, obviously is more, if we know which model of operation that ultimately would be implemented, it would be easier to answer that. I mean, I guess right in theory, if the staff could park in the lot. Now, if they did park in the lot during the day, they'd have to move their cars if they wanted to do kiss and ride. So it's right. The two don't. That's the problem. The lot is not big enough to accommodate, people parking there at the same time as that. So I suppose we could maybe tweak number 5 to maybe allow for flexibility. I don't know, Ms. Coma, your hand just went back up.
Just want to say I would be comfortable with striking number 5 to give the applicant more flexibility. If I can amend my motion.
You can amend your motion if that's, so you sounds like you've just amended it. Mr. Stevens then as the seconder would need to second your amendment, so to speak.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right, so now we have the amended motion with it, which is with a second. Just so we're clear, so we're keeping number 1, we deleted 2, we keep 3, we keep 4, we delete 5, and we keep 6. Right, so as long as everybody's clear. So is there any further discussion on the motion to recommend to the BZA with these conditions as revised, as discussed? Ms. Weiss?
I'm sorry, I do have one more question. Nearby, just in number 4, staff will not park directly in front of residential homes nearby the daycare facility. That's kind of a vague term. Do we need to define that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I agree. It's subject to it's interpretation about what's nearby. I mean, I think staff is trying to say, we're trying to avoid a situation where neighbors, have a staff person's car in front of their house all day long. Granted, it is a public street, but we obviously would want to minimize, any negative effects on them. I mean, it gets to what other options they have. I mean, are there enough spaces in front of the parkland or the not in front of single family homes to accommodate the kind of staff that she's looking at? And that's a question for staff. Is there enough on-street parking not in front of the houses in that or along in that area there to accommodate that? Is that realistic?
There's enough space on-street parking along the parcel to accommodate probably comfortably 4 spaces, maybe not 6 plus for staff, but certainly that would be a space for certain staff members to park there, but not all.
Okay, so in some ways, then knowing that, then 4 kind of isn't workable if they want to do the drop off, the carpool line or whatever, the drop off line, because then staff can't be in the lot, then they have to be on the street, and they might not be able to find a spot that's not in front of a house. Ms. Coma, your hand just went back up.
There's also, as the applicant has noted herself, there's also parking on Irving. You're connected right to Irving or really any of the streets on Berman. So I think there's ample public parking available near the Scout House. Personally, I'm comfortable with the nearby. I imagine if the BZA wanted to be more specific, then they could maybe introduce that specificity. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah, well, the question is, like we're saying, they can't park, staff cannot park in front of a house. And so then the question becomes, in that area, most of the curb, most parking spots are in front of somebody's house, except for the Scout House itself and right around that and right in that area. So if we leave it in there like that and the BZA were to adopt it, we might have a situation where, by nearby, they'd have to sort of use their judgment and park a block or 2 away, but then they're still in front of somebody's house. I don't know. I mean, in some ways, we either need to be comfortable with the fact that staff would park on the street, and then maybe we don't even need number 4, or we want staff to park off street, and they either have to use the lot or they have to, in the applicant's material, she mentioned like some type of satellite parking. I mean, we kind of have to either accept that possibility that there would be on-street parking for some number of staff or not, I think. I mean, I think just by the fact that the closest on-street spots are in front of the Scout House, those would probably fill up first. So maybe it's okay. Ms. Weiss, did your hand go back up?
Oh, sorry, that's me. I'll take it down.
No, I do have my hand back up. I've got company here as well, so my camera's off for a second. But yeah, I would actually propose striking number 4. I mean, that would put staff in an awkward position, or if they parked half in front of somebody's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how important it is. If people are working during the day, I don't know what kind of impact it will be for an additional 5 or 6 cars parking on the street, sometimes in front of a house.
Okay. All right, so hearing that, so we've heard that opinion, but Ms. Coleman, your hand is back up. It's your motion, so.
It's my motion. Yeah, I would be comfortable with that. I mean, these are public streets, and it doesn't sound like we're going to have, 20 or 30 staff vehicles and parked on Spring Street for, every day, all day long. So to me, and there are ample public parking opportunities both in front of the Scout House, on Irving Street, nearby, in front of other houses. And I think giving the applicant the flexibility to, it sounds like she's really committed to making this work for the neighborhood, for the program to be successful. And so I would be comfortable with also striking number 4.
Okay. Mr. Stevens, as the seconder, are you comfortable with striking number 4?
Yeah, well, okay, just to keep things moving along, I'll go along with that.
Yeah, I think, all right, so we have a second now, and then just discussion here. I mean, I would just chime in that, as I just said, I think, honestly, if it sounds like they might have as many as 6 people, even though we're not limiting that, six staff, most of the on-street spaces that are closest are right in front, and that's where most people would naturally go. So we might be talking about 1 or 2 staff, maybe if they ever had that need for them, that might park close by. And I know at least one of the houses right to the north is vacant now. So I mean, that may not always be the case, but anyhow, all right. So I'm fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, so no discussion on that. We're gonna then ask for a roll call on the motion as is just amended.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Krasner.
Yes. All right, that motion passes. Ms. Wills, good luck at the BZA.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along here. I know that might probably took a little longer than we thought, but that's how it goes. Next item for public hearing is public hearing on the subdivision and lot line adjustment at 222 West Greenway Boulevard and 221 West Cameron Road.
So that's actually one of mine. I'll just go through the staff report briefly with you. So tonight's, the Planning Commission is requested to hold a public hearing to consider approval of the preliminary and final subdivision plat for the property located at 222 West Greenway, Falls Church, which also includes a lot line adjustment with the neighboring property at 221 West Cameron Road. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final plat approval of a subdivision of 222 West, that should be 222 West Greenway Road Boulevard, with conditions noted in the recommended motion, see above. And we did make some edits already to the motion. I did send that out to planning commissioners and the applicant earlier today. We can go over that in a minute. The work session on April 21st, 2021 brought up a couple of points about the subdivision. First of all, street addressing was an issue that has since been resolved. Staff has looked into it, and the street to the north has been identified as Seton Lane as opposed to a leg of West Greenway, or I'm sorry, of West Cameron. So that will be, if there's signage there that needs to be adjusted, we are working to do that. The applicant has also adjusted these on their on revised plats as well. Of much discussion too was the sidewalk referenced in the staff comments should be included. The applicant had provided us at the time of distribution, of material distribution, the applicant had submitted a sidewalk sketch. They have since submitted a amended plat with the sidewalk included. that was sent out today as well. We also had a discussion about public noticing. Staff put a yard sign for this application and is preparing an order for extra yard signs so that they can be readily available for future applications, and those will go up earlier on in the process. So a little bit more about the subdivision. The subject property at 222 West Greenway includes 2 underlying lots of record. However, the lots are as recorded are substandard for lot area frontage. Therefore, the applicant has filed for a lot line adjustment to incorporate access land area from a neighboring third lot to meet lot area requirements and a subdivision to reorient the lots to meet frontage requirements. The subdivision with the associated lot line adjustment does meet requirements of the city and the zoning code. The 222 West Greenway is under ownership by Michael L. Britton. Existing structures on the property consist of a 1.5-story frame house with a detached garage. There's one curb cut for a driveway on the north side facing what we now know as Seton Lane. So sorry, that must be adjusted in the staff report. The lot line adjustment includes a transfer of 504 square feet from 222 West Cameron Road in order for it to meet the requirements of the subdivision. The proposed subdivision is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the zoning code, meets setback requirements. So staff had reviewed the first submission before the work session 2 weeks ago and found that it mostly fell into compliance with the subdivision chapter of the code. There was only one comment regarding the construction of sidewalk at the frontage of the property due to the site's proximity to Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. That has since been provided. Also, we had one outlining comment from Public Works. They just wanted to see where the future curb cuts would be. That has also been provided to staff. Like I said, I had distributed the revised plats only today to the Planning Commission. So I can pull those up now to take a look at them. An initial review just of today, a review of the revised subdivision. Staff is confident that it will meet the requirements. They met the Public Works comment, and that the applicant has worked with planning staff as well as the arborist to work on the proposed layout for the sidewalk. So that is now being shown in their revised plats. We do have Antoinette and the applicant on the line as well, if they wish to go over anything.
Okay.
This is Rob. I just want to be sure my mic is working this time.
Yes.
Okay, great. I didn't have anything to add to your. I just want to be sure in case I did. But I would say thank you for your time this evening, and let's keep moving forward here.
All right, Mr. Hollern, just so I'm clear, so I mean, you sent us, also an amended motion as well. Is that also right? So that's not been uploaded to the web, right? So what you sent us today in the afternoon, is that still the latest and greatest?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that was done really just this afternoon. We wanted to make sure that any outlying condition or things that need to be changed for a future submission are shown in the motion. So we went through and added all of the specific things that we're looking for, most of which are fairly minor.
All right, so the plat and the motion are what you sent out, and so that's what we should be referring to.
And I will share I'm going to put the amended motion on the screen so that folks can read through it. And then as soon as you'd like, I can pull up the plats as well.
Do you want to run through the changes in the motion? I don't think, some of them maybe you already
Sure.
alluded to, but yeah.
Sure. The one change that we did is we actually, as what is typical for a subdivision, is we typically farm out naming of the plat to the historical commission, and the historical commission did a lot of work as far as helping us to name the plat, and they dug up a lot of great history on the plat and the area itself. So when we had sent out this staff report, we were originally going to go with the historical commission's proposed name, which was Perigo Tract, for a Perigo family that had lived there many years ago. But since then, staff took another look at it, and this is part of the Greenway Downs overlay. So we are hoping instead that we will change the name to the Greenway Downs Overlay District Section 5 instead, because I think that is more consistent with what our staff and city assessor would like to see. I do think that was something that was caught by Gary Fuller, if he has anything to add to that. Otherwise, there are a few additional conditions down at the bottom you'll read, most of which are all very minor changes that we'd like to see to the final plat. Usually it's information that's already included in the final plat. But I think there was as you can imagine, there was a lot of moving around between the work session and the public hearing to make sure that this information was as up to date for tonight as we could get it. So not all of the little details are included within this final plat, but that's what the conditions here hope to clear up for us.
Okay. Then Mr. Fuller, whose hand just went up? Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I'll just follow up. The motion tonight is to approve the preliminary and final plats, and these are just administrative items that either we need final signatures from the owners, or we're just labeling with notes some things that we need to note and make sure happen. So, we see these as routine administrative things we can follow up on. In terms of the naming of the subdivision, actually there was an existing name already available. Normally what happens is if it's a unnamed parcel, then we send it to the historical commission, and then they'll recommend names. In this case, it wasn't necessary, and it's even more confusing to rename, an island in the middle of an already designated area, and it had its own designation. So we just we're straightening that out. So there was no need to rename. So that kind of explains that. So if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fuller and Mr. Holland. Any questions for staff from the commission? Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Stevens was first to raise his hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we did get the letter from Beth Buffington, who lives close by, and as is often the case on these subdivisions for us, our ability to deal with these issues is extremely limited in terms of what we're being asked to review here. So just wanted to point that out, to acknowledge the letter, but there's very little about the issues that we can do anything about. I would ask staff, though, would they agree with that? These are all issues that pretty much fall outside of the subdivision issues that we're dealing with.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Let's see, I think Mr. Puentes was next.
Just quickly for Mr. Holman, you mentioned something in your remarks about yard signs going up. I didn't know what that was referring to. Is that notice for the neighbors?
Yeah, so I can't remember who had brought it up. I thought it was Ms. Weiss, discussing last time about early public notification of these these types of applications. And I think the Planning Commission, we had chatted about it a long time ago. I want to say it was back last fall, that we had talked about how we want to properly notify the public of these types of applications. So signage was a big thing for the Planning Commission, and we think it's probably one of the most effective, especially for notifying folks in the area who frequently walk by the site. So we do signage for larger applications, but we are still working on getting that rolled out for smaller applications like subdivisions. I think in this case it worked out well because we did get a couple of public comments, I think from folks who had seen the sign,
Great,
as opposed to the letter.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think Miss Teets was next.
Yeah, I was. I kind of wanted to comment along the same lines as Mr. Stevens, because I think in the letter she had said something about this was not like a by right thing, but actually a subdivision kind of is. It's, you know, even though the Plan Commission votes on it, it's a more administrative vote than a lot of our votes, where we really just have to say, is this subdivision legal? Does it meet the requirements in terms of the size of the lot and the frontage on the street? And if it does, there's really not much we can do in that area. The other thing is there was a lot of concern about runoff and flooding in that area. And I guess the only thing good I can say about it, because I drove over there recently, is that these lots are at the bottom kind of a slope coming down from Greenway down. So any, you know, hopefully they deal well with the water on those sites and put in all the requirements that they'll have to deal with water. But if there was any kind of water issue, it's probably going to keep heading downhill to Trips Run itself through the school playground. So from that point, at least it's not going to aggravate any of the neighbors that are up the slope from them that are having flooding problems currently. But another thing is there were some concerns about the sidewalk, that maybe they don't need it. But I think we all know, like, the number one request that we get from a lot of neighborhoods is either neighborhood comment of traffic or sidewalks. And so I think that if we can get a sidewalk in an area, in a school area, even if it's just a piece of one, we really should be trying to do that. You know, it doesn't make sense not to put a sidewalk in there if we can get one as part of the subdivision. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Teets. Ms. Weiss, you were next.
Yes, I actually had a procedural question on the public comments. This is a public hearing, and the commenter is not able to share her comments during the meeting live, and the comments came in at a time where they weren't able to be posted. Is there a way that staff can make the comments public, or to at least summarize the key points? Ms. Teets has just summarized some of the points, but since this neighbor took the time to submit the comment, I think it would be good and effective if we can find a way to either share the comments or at least highlight the key points that were made in them.
Ms. Weiss, can you clarify how that comment was sent in?
The comment, well, let's see. Mr. Hollern sent us a letter, a Word document as an attachment in email today.
Okay, was that the one that I sent earlier today?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have received a second one as well. Sorry.
Oh, is there a second one too? Okay.
Yeah.
And I would agree with Ms. Weiss. I think in the past, Emily has actually summarized some of these emails or even read them verbatim.
Right, and actually, I think we should. I was going to get to, you know, whether we had any other public comments, you know, or, you know, even testimony, but we should do that because, you know, it is a public hearing, and these are folks who might have come in person if they were allowed to do that in a different forum. So, I mean, where's the second? I don't know if I got this. Did I get the second one? Was that sent? When was that sent out?
I sent that after hours today. It might have been right before the meeting.
Oh, I did. I think I did. One was sent in the morning and one was sent later in the day.
Yeah, there was one that we received after the typical comment deadline. but I still wanted to make sure that the planning commissioners got it.
Okay. Is that the one by Miss is it Buffington? Was it? Yeah, Miss
Yeah.
Buffington?
We have one from Miss Buffington and one from Miss Veal. Sorry if I'm pronouncing names incorrectly.
I got the one from Miss Deal. Well, we should.
I can read that one if you'd like.
We should. I mean, although if they were here, again, they're only permitted. Can you read it in? What do we usually give people? 3 minutes?
I can read this in 3 minutes.
Okay, then why don't we do that? Then why don't we address the public comment at this time?
Sure. So this is from Jennifer Veal. She's at 207 West Cameron Road. The comment reads, Dear Mr. Hollern, I do not agree with the proposed project for the following reasons. Subdividing the lot and building another house on the street will further exacerbate traffic and parking congestion on the street. Furthermore, a proposed sidewalk to nowhere in front of the house does not make sense in front of an elementary school, and it could become a safety issue. At the end of the street where Seton Lane and West Cameron intersect, also frequently a casualty to storms in the neighborhood by flooding. Additionally, residents on West Cameron are already dealing with a higher water table and threat of basement flooding. Lastly, can we measure the impact of removing 2 large redwoods on the already high water table? Kindly, Ms. Veal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holland. And all right, and the other letter from Ms. Buffington, was that one posted so that the public could read that or not? Was that also, that was just emailed to us? So otherwise we probably need to summarize. That one's longer, but we probably need to summarize that one as well.
Okay, I'm going to pull that up here.
You can probably read that one in 3 minutes verbatim, I would guess.
Yeah, I guess go ahead and try. I mean, it's long. It's longer, but you know, given the circumstances we're forced to operate in, I mean, we should probably just read it. I mean, if we had 20 letters, it'd be a different story. But if it's only this one, we'll go ahead and read it into the record verbatim.
Sure. So to the chair and members of the Falls Church Planning Commission, city staff, public comment regarding 222 West Greenway Boulevard and 221 West Cameron Road, lot line adjustment and subdivision. My name is Beth Buffington, and I live at 212 West Cameron Road, Falls Church, Virginia, 22046. I am a registered architect and have practiced over 35 years in the Washington, D.C. area. My husband, Ron Anzalone, is chairman of the Historical Commission in the city of Falls Church. We have lived at our current address for 33 years. Our property is adjacent to Trips Run and is now considered to be in the 100-year floodplain. I have several serious concerns about the proposed lot line adjustment and redevelopment of the property. These lots are located in a very sensitive location in terms of flooding, pedestrian circulation, and traffic circulation. Starting with flooding and stormwater, the Trips Run watershed is a sensitive area for development. There is already significant flooding at the Cameron, Seton, and Sharrow intersection, as all the water uphill on Cameron, Greenway, and West George Mason Drive is inevitably funneled down to Trips Run at a low point in this area. The houses on Sharrow Avenue and Cameron Road at this intersection regularly flood. The Trips Run floodplain is not static. Every time FEMA reruns the calculation, we have less and less permeable area and more development. And it is inevitable that the 100-year flood will expand and more homes will be at risk. When we bought our property on Cameron Road, none of it was in the 100-year floodplain. Now it almost all is. As for pedestrian circulation, the school and the adjacent bike path are huge generators of pedestrian traffic at all times of the day and all days of the week. The school is a mecca for dog walkers, fitness enthusiasts, sports groups, bikers, skateboarders, and children of all sizes and descriptions. It is a wonderful part of the Falls Church community. Pedestrian traffic in this area works because there is only one path and one crosswalk from Cameron Road to the school. This redevelopment and the addition of another sidewalk, which links to nothing but Greenway Road, would confuse walkers and create additional jaywalking along Seton Lane. Without a doubt, with a number of children and adults using this crossing, someone will be hurt. Vehicular circulation. The subject lots are at an intersection of Cameron Road, Seton Lane, and Sharrow Drive. There is a three-way stop at this intersection. It is always busy. The TJ Elementary, to be renamed Oak Street Elementary, is directly across the street, and there are lines of cars morning and evening for drop-off and pickup of students. Both Cameron Road and Sharrow Avenue are cut-through streets connecting Broad Street and Lee Highway and avoiding the intersection of those two roads in downtown Falls Church. There is there is traffic to and from the school and adjacent playing fields. Teachers, parents, and members of the public often visit the site for events and games. The school is a polling place. This redevelopment would further confuse the traffic at this complicated intersection and reduce vehicular safety. As a summary, this is not a landowner by right issue and will allow another house, which significantly increases density at this critical intersection. In my personal and professional opinion, it would be irresponsible of the city to allow this subdivision and lot line adjustment, which will increase storm runoff at a sensitive location. It'll complicate pedestrian circulation at a complicated intersection used by all of the city's elementary school children, and it will complicate vehicular circulation at a busy and complex intersection. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Holland.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, so that's the public comment. I guess the applicant kind of said they had nothing else to add, but I would say I'll give either the applicant or Ms. Isherwood the opportunity to either make a comment or or respond to the public comment we received if they'd like.
Sure, I can speak to it. So, I guess I did want to just kind of make the note. I know there were concerns about the density at this corner here, and without the subdivision, this lot, the existing lot, could be developed as a two-family dwelling. So I did want to kind of just make that note, because if there's a concern about density, and talking about by right development, that is, I guess, in my opinion, the same density to be able to create a two-family dwelling. And then in terms of the curb cuts that we've added, one of the houses will front on Greenway. So the existing curb cut for the house is already on Seton Lane. And so we're going to maintain one curb cut along that street. I think that was one of the other concerns. And for stormwater management, with any redevelopment, we're going to have to meet the requirements for that. So that'll come with the plan of development.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Isherwood. I see Mr. Puentes has his hand up, and I don't think he's spoken yet. So, Mr. Puentes?
No, that was from before. Apologies.
Oh, sorry. All right, Ms. Coma's hand is up.
Yeah, I had a question about the sidewalk, staff's plans for the sidewalk. I'm a support of having that sidewalk there. People often walk in the street on Seton Lane on that side of the street, so I think it will make those people safer. But I'm curious how you're going to connect it. It will sort of end. Do you know, is there an easement for the neighboring lot, 633A? How far will the sidewalk come kind of around the corner? Is it possible to connect it to either, I guess, the I don't know what that is, the opposite side of Seton Lane or to the opposite side of West Cameron?
Mr. Fuller, you had your hand up. Do you want to address that?
In terms of the existing easements, I'll let Jeff address that one. But in terms of the sidewalk, yeah, there would be a sidewalk there, and then there would be a gap beyond it. And so we've already approached Public Works and inquired with them as to potentially filling that gap in the future. So we've started that discussion. The fact that we pick up pieces with subdivisions, eventually, we want to fill those in. In this case, this one, lends to something more immediate. So we've started that conversation.
Okay, so no immediate plans for how it might connect via ramps. I know that can be a kind of complicated thing with the ADA requirements. But I guess I would just encourage you to figure out a way to ensure that it is not a sidewalk to nowhere, that it does connect to the neighboring sidewalks. And if there's a way to kind of make that intersection safer. It is a busy intersection. There are a lot of people crossing there. I think that would be an added benefit to this development.
Yes,
Thank you.
we'll be pursuing that, and like I said, we've initiated that already. Thank you.
Terrific.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's see, any other questions from commissioners on the subdivision? Okay, I mean, I would just add that as far as responding to the public comment, I think I agree with you, Ms. Isherwood, as far as for the sense of adding a house that wouldn't otherwise be added. I agree that that's not exactly the case. The two-family house would generate the same amount of traffic. It would cover a relatively similar amount of area as far as stormwater. And so in this sense, this applicant was in the, I guess you could say, fortuitous circumstance that lot 633A had land to give, so to speak, whatever the price was. They had land that they were able to spare and not make their lot non-conforming in order to provide the ability to have two conforming lots for a single family detached here. So in that sense, it is essentially a by right subdivision. It's not dramatically changing the character, along this section. And as Ms. Teets noted, it does flow downhill here. Doesn't mean stormwater isn't important, because eventually the trips run affects many other people in the city and beyond. But as far as immediate neighbors feeling the effects of this project from a stormwater perspective, that should not be the case here, as in some other applications. And we're getting a sidewalk out of it across from the only elementary school within city limits. So that's a good thing. Actually, the only school that's not true anymore, but the only elementary school within city limits. So all those things are a positive. Let's see, Mr. Holland, the only other question I had, maybe I just like last year was such a blur, but when you mentioned in the beginning of your proposed motion that this area is now within the Greenway Downs overlay district, did that get approved? I mean, I know we talked about it. We had a work session on it. I know like right before COVID hit, we had a work session on it. Did that actually come to pass from council?
I was actually hoping that Gary could fill us in on that. That was not my. Okay,
because that was added to the motion. If it's not actually, the overlay district doesn't exist, then we probably shouldn't mention it in that sense.
Yeah, no, I think you were just talking about that there's a subdivision designation for Greenway Downs there. I think that's what you're referring to, I know there's been discussion of changing zoning and having an overlay, but that hasn't occurred at this point.
Okay, well the draft motion for Mr. Holler identifies the property as being within the Greenway Downs overlay, but there is
that was a proposed overlay, yes.
Right. So
it might just need to be reworded to.
Okay. Yeah, we just want to be careful about that,
sure.
Because we've talked about, well, Ms. Teets probably remembers better than anyone else. The overlay, Greenway Downs overlay has been a dream maybe, or an idea for a long time, but it's not quite reality yet.
Well, I don't think it's going to happen now. That's kind of the story we got back, was that people have just learned to work around the zoning problems, right?
Well, yeah, for better or for worse, although I still think there's merit in that idea, but that's probably a discussion for another
I agree.
day. Yeah. Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, would it work just to take out the word overlay? And then
I think that, for our purposes tonight, yes, we just want to be accurate, and we should it's certainly within Greenway Downs, but not but the zoning is the zoning it's always been. So, right. That was the only clarification I had.
Okay, sorry about that, folks.
No problem. There's just a lot of history with that idea. All right, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead and make a motion if we want to move this along.
Sure. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, whereas the proposed subdivision at 222 West Greenway Boulevard has been reviewed and meets the requirements of the city's subdivision and zoning ordinances with the approved lot line adjustments with 221 West Cameron Road, and whereas the proposed subdivision lies within the Greenway Downs District, Section 5, and is consistent with the permitted uses and regulations of that area, I move that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final plat approval of subdivision application number 2021-0184 to subdivide 222 West Greenway Boulevard, RPC number 52-402-036, into the two proposed parcels with the following conditions. One, that the proposed parcels are addressed as 222 West Greenway Boulevard and 803 Seaton Lane from west to east as recommended by the city's building official. And two, that the subdivision be titled the Greenway Downs Section 5. And three, that the orientation of houses shall be shown on final plat for all new lots. And four, that the owner must sign and notarize final plat. And five, that the action be labeled under the notes section of the final plat, 222 West Greenway Boulevard subdivision, lot line adjustment, and 221 West Cameron Road lot line adjustment. And six, that the easement for public sidewalk and utility requires a deed of recordation from the grantor to be recorded at the time of subdivision recordation. And seven, that the revised plat submitted by the applicant, which included sidewalk and necessary easements as shown in the sidewalk exhibit attached to this staff report, be reviewed and accepted administratively by staff prior to recording to the subdivision.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Puentes, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Puentes. Any discussion on the motion? I might just say, just when we talk about, it's really not important, but in the whereas, the Greenway Downs District, again, I don't know if we should even use the word district. I don't think we have a Greenway Downs District. We have a neighborhood, subdivision, but that's probably, I'd rather just strike that altogether, just not to confuse people as to what Greenway Downs is and is not. So as long as Mr. Stevens and Mr. Puentes are okay with that, everything else sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll just say it lies within Greenway Downs. Okay, so any other discussion? If not, we'll get a roll call vote. Mr. Holland, please.
Okay, Ms. Comant,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
and Mr. Krasner.
Yes. Okay, great. That subdivision is approved. Okay, moving right along. Hopefully that's the heavy lifts of the night, but we'll see how it goes. The next item up is a public information session on the W&D park and trail crossings. We've heard this before in earlier more conceptual iterations. I believe we're at the 90% level, so we're pretty far along. Let's see who from staff is going to give us a very succinct staff report on this.
All right. So in terms of this item, it's a informational item for the commission to take a look at and provide any feedback to staff. As was mentioned, these are 90% plans. And these project goals were for the trail crossing projects to improve the safety for pedestrians and bicyclists using the trail. And it would also reinforce the prominence of the W&D trail. And the project is one that's significant in that there's a lot of users traveling through the city, and this would lead to further improvements along these lines. Since over the years, the use is expanded. So the project scope would improve the street crossings in 4 locations in Falls Church, and those crossings are located on Little Falls Street, Great Falls Street, North Oak Street, and North Spring Street. Improvements would include a mixture of narrowing the street sections, the median islands, stamped concrete, and lighting. There's also a companion project to reconstruct the existing trail with separate pedestrian and bicycle paths that's under construction by Nova Parks with a grant from the MBTA. The dual paths project alignment, which runs from Little Falls to North West Street in the city. City staff and Nova Parks and their consultants that work closely to coordinate the design on both those projects. Then the comprehensive plan guidance talks about all modes based on the 2014 adopted and civic grade streets and enhancing the WOND trail, and master plan guidance supports all of that. So at this point, what the vehicular trail crossings of the WOND park, or the trail itself, is achieving the goal of the comprehensive plan for narrowing street sections, raised crossings, traffic control, lighting, trail safety, achieved through the design elements of horizontal design, vertical design, signing. So there's graphics that indicate all those improvements, and which will be comprehensively done in those locations. There's also some concurrent investments, and those projects are already active in that quarter. So the staff analysis of the 90% plans is a modified version of the crossings described in the WOND Park Master Plan. And then there's a table that summarizes those differences as well as the design elements that became part of the final engineered plan. So, those plans are nearing completion, and so we just wanted to provide this opportunity for the Planning Commission to weigh in on any aspects or any final thoughts regarding this project. But we're very happy that this is wrapping up, and so we wanted to present this to you as an informational item. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Any questions? Ms. Cohen.
Hi, I'm so excited to see this come into reality. These are sorely needed at the intersections for the WOND trail. I just have a couple questions. I just want to confirm that these crossings are raised. Is that correct? Because looking at, so I was a little confused about it, and I may just not be well versed in reading these plans.
My understanding is they're all raised crossings. I'm not the project manager on this. Let's see. Let's drop in on those plans. But in terms of the staff report, it describes them as raised.
Okay.
So.
My other comment, and since you're in there, if you go to page, let's see, page 8.
Okay.
Perhaps the next page. Yes. So the median that's depicted there, it looks like those, I'm not sure what that material is. It looks like stone. Is that correct? Sort of on either side. I'd really love to see, because this is the park, I know that visibility can be an issue, but I'd really love to see some like low growing plants there instead of stone. Yes. So if that could be a considered, and in a few other areas, it looks like we're adding a lot of concrete. And if there are opportunities to add less concrete and add more green things that are alive and growing and kind of contribute to the feeling of it being a park that will not hinder, visibility. I know that might be a concern. I would love to have that explored if possible. Those are my 2 comments.
Okay, yeah, we can make that note.
Okay, Miss Weiss.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the issue of raised versus flat crossings. My interpretation of the staff report is that these are in fact flat crossing. On page or line 80, there's a table in the staff report that says as engineered, flat crossing at grade with street. Is that the correct interpretation, that these are flat crossings?
There we go. Design element, raised crossing at grade with park.
It's like it was changed, right?
Flat, yeah. So, yeah, it looks like it was changed. Yep. Concern about stormwater flows and the cost of installing additional stormwater infrastructure. Okay. So it looks like, you know, originally it was proposed as that. So is that something that you'd like to comment on further? I mean, I apologize. I haven't worked on this project at all, so I'm not completely up on it.
I would prefer the crossings be raised if possible. Okay. I think the original intention of these WNOD crossings were for drivers to feel like they were traversing through a park rather than, you know, the opposite. It may be a too late at this point, but I would support raised crossings if they're feasible.
All right. Is that the general consensus of the Planning Commission?
Well, I would just add, this is Tim. I mean, the explanation is concerned with stormwater flows, but we don't have an engineer here who can kind of tell us what those issues are. But usually those crossings are slightly higher than the immediate street areas around them. After all, it used to be a railroad. So, you know, at first blush, it doesn't make sense. But like I say, that it could be the straightforward explanation that somebody could provide. But yeah, lacking that understanding, I would agree that anything that helps to slow down cars and the feel that they're impeding on something, which a raised trail would do, would be preferred.
All right, we'll pursue that with the project planner and the consultant, and then we can report back in the director's report at a future meeting here.
All right. I mean, it sounds like, you know, we're at 90%, and I guess, you know, things get value engineered out, unfortunately. But some of the stuff, right? It's just not clear to me, you know. If like we're saying the raised crosswalks were a stormwater concern, I mean, it seems unusual that might be it seems that difference would be significant, especially considering that with the stormwater upgrades that are going on with the dualizing of the trail right now, you know, I mean, I can't imagine that would ever change in grade or additional runoff. It's not additional runoff, I suppose, it's all impervious, but whatever change in grade is going on would go on because of the raised crosswalk. Couldn't somehow be dealt with all the, you know, new infrastructure that's going in to deal with the extra pavement for the new trail. So that to me seems strange. I don't know. I know that's a Nova Parks project, you know, and I don't know again with the budgets and how how this is working, if, you know, what the relationship is, you know, as far as that goes, but it would seem there would be opportunities to explore that if that wasn't done already. So perhaps Ms. Odanino, whoever's the project manager, has a very good and reasonable answer to that, but that does seem strange to me. The other comment I might make too is, you know, I see they're showing stamped concrete instead of brick pavers, you know, as the, you know, in the crossings, you know, the brick pavers were designed, stamped concrete is cheaper, but, you know, and stamped concrete, it's not even so much from an aesthetic standpoint that I have a concern, but sometimes stamped concrete can actually be a little slippery. You know, and if so, just for people, bikes and cars. I mean, there are times where I just know stamped concrete, depending on how it's done, can be a little slippery, and perhaps there's techniques that, you know, would make it perfectly suitable. But people maybe are better versed in it than I. Maybe, you know, would say what you're talking about is going to be fine. But I know from experience that stamped concrete has a higher or a lower, whatever they call it, coefficient of friction. It's more slippery. So that's another question as far as, you know, from a safety perspective, is it less safe to have the concrete versus the pavers?
Okay.
That was really my only concern, other than what was already mentioned. All right. Anybody else? And we're going to try to keep on moving here because somehow the night's getting away from us. We still have a few more things to address. So, if there are any other comments from folks on this, it is at the 90% level. So, I think we do need to keep our comments targeted, and it sounds like we have. So, if not, if there are no other further comments on that, this is not a public hearing, right? This is just a public information session.
Yeah, this was just an informational session
Right.
for you. And so what I'll do is I'll write up these comments and then Paul will pass them on, and then we'll respond at a future meeting.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. That sounds like a plan. All right. So moving right along, since we want to keep on trucking here. Next item up is the approval of March 21st's minutes. Does anyone have any corrections, changes, or can not? I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes from March 21.
I believe they're actually April 21st. I think they were mislabeled in the link, but
Putting up the agenda.
yeah.
I was wondering about that. All right. Sorry, my bad. April 21, which was not all that long ago. And that was a long night. Any comments on those minutes from anybody?
Chair, I move we approve the minutes of April 21st.
I second.
All right, we got a motion and a second by Ms. Teets. Any discussion? If not, roll call vote.
Okay, Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Krasner.
Yes. Okay, great. Minutes are approved. We're up to speed on that. All right, number 7, informational items. We have planning commissioners' reports and correspondence. So starting with planning commissioners' reports, I believe Mr. Puentes wanted this item added, so maybe I'll throw it over to Mr. Puentes. Is that correct?
Oh, just there was a briefing this afternoon by the Coalition for Smarter Growth about the redevelopment of the proposed redevelopment by EYA of the West Falls Church site. A couple of other commissioners were there. Just it was an information session, more advocacy than anything else, and they took questions.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I did hear about that, but thank you for forwarding that along. I'm sure for those of you who attended, I'm sure it was interesting to hear.
Yeah, this is Tim. It was a good session from the standpoint that Evan Goldman talked quite a bit, not so much about the Falls Church site, which we're presumably familiar with, but the other 2 sites. And it's recorded, so anybody who might want to go back could probably go to the Coalition for Smarter Growth website and have access to the recording.
That's great. That was my next question. Could those of us who were not able to watch it. So good. Excellent. Any other planning commissioner reports? Okay. Not hearing any. So we'll keep on moving. There's a number of correspondence items, Mr. Fuller. I mean, I've read them, and I don't know if we need to really discuss each one point by point, unless folks have specific questions. I mean, the way I view correspondence items are that they're kind of there for our information. We don't need to get into a long discussion about them unless people like to or have a particular thing they want to highlight. So, and that includes staff. So the items are there. Is there any other correspondence items that folks want to discuss? Otherwise, we'll file them. Otherwise, we'll file them away as correspondence. All right. So with that, we'll move to director's report. And Mr. Fuller, I guess that's you tonight.
Yes. I'll start off with, upcoming on our planning commission agenda. So at the next meeting on the 19th, we'll have a speaker series with Eileen Winquist, Arlington County. We'll be discussing stormwater environmental planning. That's based on a stormwater task force is invited. Second item is the West Falls Church lot line adjustment regarding that project and the school property and the developer property and the lot line adjustment that needs to occur on that. And then there'll be a council work plan and equity action item, and then Fairfax County comprehensive plan update onto the work session on that. So anyway, so we'll have those 4 items. So we'll have another fairly full agenda. In terms of the director's report itself, you were given several items. The Surface Transportation Act, the City of Falls Church has a request through Congressman Beyer in the 2021 surface funding, authorizing the Senate Transportation Infrastructure Appropriations Committee. City's requested just under $7 million in funds for citywide multimodal transportation infrastructure improvements. And if those are awarded, the funds will be used to enhance those types of projects in our transportation network throughout the city. Secondly, the Smart Cities test bed recently passed. Virginia State budget included a large award for a joint effort with the city and Virginia Tech to develop a test bed for smart cities technologies. The city's requested an additional $4 million for federal surface transportation funds for a smart city connected transportation infrastructure test bed and so forth. This is a pilot project the city's partnered with Virginia Tech on to perform. So anyway, it'll test technologies such as adaptive lighting, smart parking, single timing, autonomous vehicles, and connecting vehicles, including transit and other types of efficiency types of objectives. Also, the MVTC has written a letter of support with requests due to the project's alignment with the envisioned route for the Route 7 bus rapid transit BRT project. So those were just some informational items for you. And that concludes the director's report. Were there any questions on any of those items?
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Any questions? Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, just real quick on the next meeting that we have with you mentioned something about the comprehensive plan in Fairfax County. Is that just with respect to the Grad Center and the WMATA site, or is that something else?
No, that's for that West Falls Church area site. Yes.
Okay, so that's that so-called TSA process that the county is going through.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Ms. Teets?
Yes, I just want to point out in the correspondence, we actually had 2 neighbors from citizens. One was from neighbors near the Founders Road Phase 2, like the Rite Aid site, asking for more information about what's going to happen there. And I just wanted to point that out because it was public. It was a public letter sent to us, and that they seem, they're good with the development, but they're concerned that like the anchor might be 7-Eleven and wondered if we could get more there. So just wanted to point that out that we had gotten that. Nice slow scrolling, thank you. But anyway, so I guess like as we're looking at this project, we should remember some of these questions that are coming from the neighbors.
Yeah, we've put those in a file. So the next public meeting, either probably a work session that you'll have on that item, will include those in that round. So they won't, so in other words, since we haven't had an action item before you on it, we'll continue to include those in the next staff report related to it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and then the other letter that came up was from someone talking about the Virginia Tech site. I'm not sure if staff can answer the questions they had in there, but they were saying that they understood that the contract for Virginia Tech, if they buy the land from us, precludes them from doing commercial or residential uses. I don't know if staff knows the answer to those.
Yeah, those are questions that we've passed on because those are really not for the planners. It's more of a contractual side of things that we don't have all those documents. We're not able to answer those, so we passed it on.
Right. Okay. I just want to make sure something was done with that because I thought that was interesting. And the last thing, correspondence. I'm sorry, I'm really hot on correspondence today. I saw that the staff sent a letter to the Fairfax County Department of Transportation about the Seven Corners Ring Road. And so I know we've been hearing about this maybe 7 or 8 years, something like that. I mean, it's been coming, and every time it comes back around, we say that we don't want to be part of the ring because at one point they wanted to use Roosevelt and Roosevelt as part of their ring, and they wanted to involve Hillwood. Obviously, these areas of the city next to Seven Corners that would be part of this ring are all residential. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. I was just wondering, was this letter triggered by something? Did Fairfax County send some information to us? Did they have some kind of event that brought it back up?
I think it was some routine notice where they notify the adjacent jurisdiction.
Okay.
If I recall others' conversation on it, I haven't been directly involved, but I recall something along those lines.
I believe this past like winter or early spring, there was some additional like public outreach that the county was doing on the Seven Corners Ring Road project, and I think that's where it's coming from. And it has been it's been studied now for a number of years, but I believe they were doing some outreach more recently, and I believe that's why Paul drafted that letter.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. I mean, because it's as someone who lives on that side of the city, it was very concerning at the very beginning when they first were trying to run this thing through residential neighborhoods, including in my right between the cemetery and a neighborhood at one point. But okay, so just I'm just curious. I guess this is something we're really going to have to keep watching because it could really affect a lot of our citizens on that side of town.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I believe they definitely had some public meetings back in like February or March. The county had some virtual meetings they hosted, so there may be some more information we can get on that as far as where it's going. Okay.
I guess there was one other letter too. The ESC sent us something about the city center special exception application. So I assume that'll come up when we are looking at that project again.
Right. I think some of those folks were either, some of those folks had representatives at that meeting as well as Founders Row, and so so they were kind of putting it into writing, which is good. Okay.
That's it for me.
Great. So that's that. We had the director's report. There are no further comments on the director's report. We'll jump into our work session for the evening, which is the council's work plan and on equity specifically. And I guess staff is going to give us a presentation. Is it also you, Mr. Fuller?
Let me pull that item up. That one. Let's see. All right. All right, so on this item, I'm not, let's see. Can you scroll down a little bit on that? Thanks, Jeff. All right, right there. Perfect. let's see, so the city council, as part of their work plan, is conducting a review through this month. And so the following from the Planning Commission's discussion as part of the year's annual advance, staff recommended that Planning Commission identify ways to increase social equity through the performance of, the city charter, state city codes. This in generally includes reviewing the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, review of development applications, and the CIP program. And so the request is to review and discuss these duties and roles in general to ensure that the city is equitably serving the needs of all. So this review is a directive of the city council as they work to better integrate in terms of principle of equity throughout the services provided by the city. So in terms of council's authorized groups to make recommendations on policy changes. And so this is before you, to make some preliminary comments on it. So I'll go ahead and open it up. Some of the topic areas are outlined starting in line 34, regard to housing, urban design, public investments. Obviously, housing has been a topic of discussion with a lot of our development projects of late, and just providing affordable housing in the region and locally. Then urban design and public investment in these types of improvements. So with that, I'll just open it up to the commission and for any general comments.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Right. I think we discussed this, at least introduced the idea a few weeks ago. I forgot which meeting it was at. I know Ms. Weiss, I think, reminded staff that this was something that the council had asked all boards and commissions to address by, I think this spring. And so we needed to tackle that. I did talk to Mr. Stoddard about this topic. I also, just for informational purposes, I sent around, the webinar that was offered recently, and Mr. Stoddard attached some stuff from the American Planning Association. Not to toot our horns as city planners, but, I would say that, all boards and commissions, I'm sure, think about equity, but planners, I think, especially in recent years, have done a fairly good job of looking at that. And for us, when I talked to Paul and we were kind of brainstorming about this topic, in some ways, I feel like, for us to be able to include, we already, I think, at least in a indirect way, think about equity and everything we do, just based on the issues we tackle and some of the comments we raise, everything from affordable housing to transit, to, multimodal transportation. There's a host of things we look at. But for me, I felt like, the one way that we could begin to, and I'll just throw this out there as an idea just to get the conversation started, was, having an equity sort of discussion added to, or an equity subsection of any time we're updating any part of the comp plan, any section or topic area, or to include a section that specifically hits on the equity topic. Is this plan addressing the city's goals with respect to that? So, as far as implementation, in a way, we as the Planning Commission can have an impact and make sure we're actually addressing this in our work, not just in general. I think incorporating it formally into our planning documents, is an idea I had that we could do to try to tackle that. But that was just something that I thought about, talking with Mr. Stoddard. So anyhow, with that, I see Ms. Weiss has put her hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a great idea. I have a couple thoughts on this. One is just kind of starting with who we are and our demographics as a city. We are very white, I think over 80%, if I recall correctly. We're pretty high income, extremely high income, I would say. And I think I can't scientifically state this, but I would say a number of members of boards and commissions, come from this privileged community. So I think there's something about who we are as a city and who we are potentially as individual planning commission members. That means that we probably have a lot of just education and work to do to understand these issues better, particularly in the context of, it's all well and good to support equity, but then when it comes to actually making hard decisions, that's when people tend to want to hoard their privileges and make suggestions for other people to improve equity elsewhere, but not here. NIMBYism, I guess, is the more accurate way of saying that. So I'd like to propose that there be some sort of education or engagement discussion at the Planning Commission about really what equity means on a more ongoing basis. A speaker series might be one potential idea. I do note that in the correspondence, there were 2 presentations on housing policy and segregation. I mean, those would be, I think one was by McGuire Woods and somebody from George Mason University. Let's have them come in and talk to us. There's probably other speakers who would be useful for us to hear as well. Now, the library board has taken on this 21-day racial justice course. That might be something. There might be other resources that we could share, individually as planning commission members. I don't know anything about the program. I haven't looked it up, so I can't tell you about it or propose it. But that's just a potential idea. So 1, education and thinking about who we are. 2, Mr. Krasner, I like your idea of adding an equity section to every comp plan discussion. I would actually suggest that we extend that further and add that to every action we need to take. Just ask the question, what is the impact on equity, or how is equity affected by this decision that we're making? And I will stop there.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weiss. Now, those are all very good points. Does anybody, well, and actually, just to respond to that too, I mean, I agree as far as, the makeups of boards and commissions, which is obviously something that city council, that's maybe more in their wheelhouse, but to, just like on every, to the extent, we do have different groups within the city, we want the boards and commissions to, membership to reflect, the diversity that we do have. We may not be the most diverse jurisdiction in the region, but we do have probably more diversity than maybe the memberships of the boards and commissions represent, and there are probably various reasons for that. I don't think any of them are nefarious, but I think that's something that's so as far as we have a vacancy on the commission right now, and so to the extent we can, again, there's some maybe for city council, but if we as members, if we know people that might provide a different perspective and encourage them to maybe, get involved. There may be reasons why some groups maybe have been less involved historically, with certain things like that. So, but yeah, that's a very good point. Anybody else have any comments they'd like to make on this topic about how we can better include equity in our work? Now, it's kind of a heady topic for almost 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday, but I mean, one thing I think also, obviously, I mean, Ms. Weiss is correct, and not just, it does go beyond the comp plan. I mean, I think there are, anytime we're approving, developments to the extent, anytime we're looking at issues related to zoning, I mean, that's been a topic that, obviously has been very high profile. Zoning is not usually a high profile topic, but somehow it found its way into the last election. And there certainly are, obviously, there's a very, zoning itself has a history that wasn't always equitable. And to the extent, our city's zoning, as we continue to look at it and refine it as a tool for, improving equity, It's something that, we do need to be mindful of. Ms. Coma.
I just want to second Ms. Weiss's great suggestions and echo her comments about how I think we all will have some blind spots, definitely, when it comes to equity issues, not having experienced many of the challenges and that people of different backgrounds might have experienced. And I just want to say I think that racial equity is really critically important to the city. And I also want us to think really carefully about economic diversity in the city, which I think we are losing. Looking at the demographics chapter, it looks like about 3/4 or more of city residents are earning 100% or more of the area median income. But in the future, we actually will. There's some small increases projected for lower income bands. And so how can we welcome those people to the city? What can we do? I think many of us on this commission probably agree that a lot of it comes back to housing and providing affordable housing in Falls Church City. And looking again at the implementation, no, sorry, not the implementation plan, but the housing capacity analysis through 2045, there are some very specific staff recommendations for concrete changes that we can make to plan for additional housing capacity in the future in Falls Church. And I think those are difficult conversations because many of them involve change and adding more residents. But I think there are conversations that we are going to need to have now if we want to be able to welcome more and different kinds of residents to the city in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, Ms. Coman. Yeah, I mean, affordable housing in some ways is the driver to help, maintain what diversity we have and to encourage more, and not just racial, but socioeconomic, which is, just as important, as far as that goes. And I agree. And obviously we certainly, the affordable housing sort of, fight, if you will, is something that has many fronts. And we kind of contend with it, in multiple ways, but I think we all agree that there's more that could be done. And so I agree. That's why I think, again, having an equity lens on, what we do, can be helpful to make sure we bring back to what, because sometimes, especially historically with planning and zoning, there have been a lot of unintended consequences, things that, weren't necessarily trying to be exclusionary necessarily, but, ultimately had that effect. And that takes many different forms, but making sure we're very careful and what we do before we approve changes to the comp plan, to the zoning ordinance, or even certain projects as they go through. So
I had one. Sorry, can I make one more comment? I agree with that, and I think it can be hard to predict what those outcomes might be. But I do think we need to think really hard about what could happen based on a variety of different changes. And then there's just one other group that I want us to be thinking about, and those are people with physical disabilities who I think that the city's trying to do a lot of work on providing better facilities, like physical facilities for people so they can have an easier time to get around, whether that's folks who are using wheelchairs or folks who are just older and maybe a little unsteady. And I think that, we should always be keeping that group in mind as well when we're making decisions, especially about new developments. I think staff does a great job of that. And obviously there's the ADA laws, but probably also another thing to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a multifaceted thing, right? It's disabilities. It's, going beyond just not just the letter of the ADA, but the spirit in what we do. And like for example, even what we just looked at, just as an example, with the trails, to the extent that, some of those changes may, have ADA implications, and what does it mean for other users, to be able to use the trail and the crossings. So I mean, there's a good quote in the attachment, which is from the American Planning Association document, just in their introduction, where it says, "Done with intention, equity is a thread that is woven through the fabric of all plans, regulations, developments, and policy options." I mean, that's kind of a aspirational statement, but I mean, that's really what we should strive to do. And I think, to a large degree, we've been doing that maybe more piecemeal, but I think council is looking for boards and commissions to do it more deliberately, holistically and deliberately. And so I agree, keeping it in the forefront of our mind, as opposed to just like this big pie in the sky topic, I think is where the rubber meets the road on equity. Because I think, in an abstract level, everyone, I would assume, on this commission, and most folks you talk to in the city you ask them about, is equity a good thing? They would generally say, sure, it's a good thing, but it's, on individual projects, on individual decisions where, there actually are give and takes that, becomes a little bit, more difficult. And so keeping it in the forefront when we're trying to make those hard decisions, may help have a better, more equitable outcome on some close calls, when we're forced to make some of those close calls. So yeah, I mean, anyone else have any other comments on that? I mean, Mr. Fuller, I mean, I think, as far as I know, you have this set up, or Mr. Stoddard set it up as having like a work session tonight, and then I think, like more of like an action on it in a couple of weeks. What was he envisioning, like a formal like response to council? I mean, is that, I'm trying to understand kind of where we're heading to. We're kind of introducing this topic tonight, but it's on the agenda again in a couple of weeks. And is that kind of what we're thinking?
Yeah, Paul and I talked briefly on this item, and he indicated, the idea was to pin some recommendations at the next meeting in 2 weeks. And so, we have, some thoughts from tonight. I would encourage the group to continue to gel, some a little more specifics on it. I think we were pretty specific tonight, in terms of the areas to focus on. So, but there may be, some more information. So I think that was the plan. It really is a policy analysis, and I think applying an equity lens, as you put it, to future actions that come before the commission is. I think we can indicate some things that are general, and then we can be specific in a few. And I think that's going to be a great start. And then I think we can build on that. So anyway, I guess you and Paul will talk a little further on it, but I would encourage everybody to continue to think about this. And then, we'll have a little more to go over at the next meeting and formalize some recommendations.
Sure. Ms. Weiss.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more comment. Just in terms of engaging the community, I was thinking about these large development town halls that we're having with boards and commissions now. And I'm thinking about town halls on West Falls Church and the schools, the town halls over time. It would be, I think, helpful to make more of an effort to, and I know this is hard, it's hard to do, but to engage pockets, communities in the city that maybe don't always show up to those meetings. Like, are we reaching out to residents of the fields? Are we providing, different language options for invitations? But just, if we can engage that small percentage of the city that doesn't, is not 80% white or extremely wealthy, I think that would just help us hear from members of our community who might have a different perspective on some of these sort of large strategic projects and what the implications are for equity.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ms. Weiss. I mean, like, for example, on Founders Row 2, which is right next to the fields, essentially, and outreach to that community. And there are various reasons why, a lot of times folks, maybe it's not as easy for them to come out to meetings. Sometimes it's, they're working at night. The times when we meet, ironically, their jobs may be shift work and they're working at night, and or they just, they're balancing many commitments. And so ways to try to solicit that input. I know the city does try to publish a lot of things in Spanish and Vietnamese and some other languages, but to the extent, like on a project like that there can be more targeted stuff, in their in local languages, or maybe, information's posted, I don't know if there's the manager of the fields can help with outreach on that project as an example, but yeah, that's a great suggestion. To be able to try to, I'm sure folks in the city, we're not a big town, so I'm sure folks have sort of, connections with the certain segments of the city community. And maybe there are people who work in City Hall who may, have contacts and know, the right people to help get the word out on some of these things. So yeah, that's a great comment. So, I mean, I guess, if there are other points people want to make tonight, we can continue to talk, or, again, it sounds like we have a couple weeks we mentioned a couple specific things tonight. I would say to folks, take the next couple weeks to maybe continue to, think about, this topic, and ultimately I think we'll look to, maybe go back to, have staff, help us kind of draft a letter or draft a response to council to, with our recommendations about how, the commission can, hit the equity issue, more directly. And again, I know there was the idea about applying that equity lens, and maybe we should, I mentioned the comp plan and also other things that we do, but if there are things that people want to mention specifically beyond what they've mentioned tonight, or say it in a more formal way, feel free to either, I guess, email Paul or me in the ensuing couple weeks. Otherwise, we'll talk about it more in a couple weeks and try to gel it down to a list of items that we can memorialize in some way and formalize. And so, okay, with that, and I don't know if folks have any other questions. Otherwise, that was our last item of the evening, and we're it's a couple minutes before 10, so we're just not too far behind the schedule that Paul estimated. And so, if there's nothing else from anyone on the commission or otherwise, I'll call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you all. Good night.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Nice to see everybody. Nice to meet the new members.
Take care, Gary.
Nice to meet you, Gary.
See you in
Good
a couple
night.
weeks.